Hi. This is my third attempt at recording this video because I didn't realize my fucking phone was out of space. If this recording doesn't work, I'm just gonna take it as a sign that Mercury is in retrograde and I'm not allowed to talk about gay things. That's just what it means, right? That's the only takeaway I can think of. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, feel free to like and subscribe. I don't know. Thank you for all the positive attention that my most recent Fire Emblem video got. I appreciate everyone who watched it and gave it a like and subscribed because of it. These videos are just something I make in my own time. I don't really expect much to come from them, let alone that people watch them. So thank you. Thank you for being interested enough to click on and stay on. I'm so scared that my camera is not recording. I have to check. Oh my God. We're gonna talk about Boyfriend Dungeon because I played it and I really liked it, which I just feel like hasn't happened for me with a game in a long time. Where I just like really like most of it and I have a couple of gripes, but in general it was quite fun and very worth the $20 that I paid. For those of you who don't know, Boyfriend Dungeon is a procedurally generated dungeon crawler meets dating sim about us, the player character, who moves to the fictional town of Verona Beach. And the premise is we move away from where we originally live to go build a social life because that's something that we struggle with is connection and intimacy. So you move somewhere to build those connections to eventually leave at the end of the summer. I don't love that there's like a timeline. I think it would have just made more sense if the character was just like committing to a move and this is just where they live now and this is their new home and they have to learn to make friends because it wasn't working out in their old city. I feel like that would make a lot more sense, but it's fine. It's fine. That's the reason we're given. That's why we're here. Your cousin sets you up in a nice apartment and tries to connect you with meeting new people. So you do have someone in the city, you do have a family member. But yeah, the premise is still meeting new people and engaging with those relationships. Is it kind of weird that your cousin and mother seem to have a really vested interest in you? Like not just having like a flourishing social life, but like very specifically dating? A little, maybe. I was Josh Safdie's muse when he wrote Uncut Gems. You know what I mean? Like things like that. Do you guys like my makeup? I did it myself. Yeah. Anywho, your family's very into you dating. That's the point. Moving on. There's a mom character in this game. She doesn't really have a face. The whole point of her is that she texts you every now and again just to check up on you and see how you're doing. Honestly, I'm kind of glad that there's an option at the beginning to block this feature. And I wish I had done it because she just sends you text messages and it's a lot. It's just a lot. It happens very frequently. She texts you a lot more often than the boyfriends do. And you know what? This game isn't called Mom Dungeon, but that is a game that I would play. That sounds kind of great. If anyone's out there making that game, I can't wait to play it and talk about it. You get a lot more texts from your mom. And that's not to say that she gets a lot of airtime, but she does occupy a lot of the downtime in between dates and dungeons. And even when she's in the dungeons, she's like, "Hey, honey, just want to check in and make sure you're okay." And you're like, "I'm killing monsters. I can't talk right now. I'm a little bit busy trying to not die." You know what I mean? So honestly, if anyone is looking to start playing this game, I don't know why you'd click on this video if you haven't already played it or if you're not even familiar with it. But if you've managed to stumble your way here and you have no idea what this game is, you have an option at the beginning to turn off the text from the mom. I would heavily suggest doing that because they don't really add. They don't necessarily subtract, but they literally just don't add anything to the experience. I found her particularly distracting. We're still recording. We're good. I didn't expect to have a new trauma because of today, but here we are. I went into this playthrough mostly blind. Besides from character art, I haven't seen any of the visuals of it, so I knew what the characters did look like before going into it. And my only exposure, I call this game BF Dunge in my notes. So my only exposure to BF Dunge was listening to Gita Jackson. They are a writer that I really like. Follow them on Twitter. I feel like if you're here, you probably already know who they are. Anywho, I listened to them talk about it on Vice's Waypoint podcast in like August or like September of last year. And they had nothing but like good things to say about the game for the most part. But through listening to that podcast, I was aware that BF Dunge had a similar structure to Hades in the sense that it is also a procedurally generated roguelite dungeon crawler and has queer representation that's mostly good. Obviously, that's why I'm here. If this game wasn't gay, I probably wouldn't care because literally, like, what's in it for me? You know what I mean? So I was aware about the queerness in this game, and that was really exciting for me. I am also aware of the Stalker character and that storyline, and that it plays a very integral role to this game. So that wasn't a surprise for me. Also, when this game initially came out, there was a content warning saying to play with care and that there were themes in this game about stalking and unwanted advances. But the initial content warning, the language was different and not as specific. So they've updated the content warning to be more specific and say like you can't really play around it because it is integral to the game's narrative and to the central plot. It's there. I'm not going to talk about that. It's not what I'm interested in. If you want to hear a more nuanced discussion about it, honestly, just go listen to the episode of this podcast. It's like Waypoint 419, I think. I listened to it for this video. Listen to someone else talk about it. I feel like that's the big controversy surrounding this game. So it's been discussed at a greater length. I don't really care for the game's main story because at the end of the day, I'm here for the boyfriends. And that's kind of it. The gameplay was fun and all, but I wanted to date. That was the objective. Overall, I found that for a game called Boyfriend Dungeon, there wasn't a lot of boyfriend and there wasn't much dungeon. And part of that has to do with the length. This game is very short. I've read in places that some people like only took 2 hours to beat this game. That was not my experience. I feel like if you are blazing through Boyfriend Dungeon, BF Dunge, and you only take 2 hours to do it, I don't think you're playing it right. Like you just must be doing something that's not what this game is about. Like you're either only doing the dungeon crawling element and that's it. That just has to be how those people played it who have those reviews who are like $20. I paid $20 for a 2-hour game. Like it just must be that they didn't go on a date with anybody, which is why are you here? It's the brunt of the game. It's the brunt of the runtime. There's only 2 dungeons and there's like over 40 dates. Why are you only doing the dungeon crawling? And why does that have you so riled up? I just don't understand. Anyways, that's my biggest gripe, is that this game just like isn't long enough, I don't think. So it has to be really soft with its punches and with its storytelling, just because they're not trying to do anything that's heavy hitting. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. This is like a very wholesome dating simulator game. You can date everyone. This game doesn't really explore the nuance of what it is to be queer in the world, what it is to be non-white in the world. It doesn't do that. It's literally just like we're people and we're dating. Irrespective of gender, irrespective of sexuality, we're people and we're dating. So because I'm a queer person, I interpret all these romances as queer romance because you can date everyone. But there are, I guess, like options. You can play the game as straight if you want to play the game as straight. Because, you know, the straights, they're just starving for representation. It's just not anywhere. It's just like so hard to find like a dating game where you can just like be a man who like dates a woman. You know what I mean? Those just like don't exist. This is crazy. So this game like hits a really specific niche because you can be straight if you want to. A lot of the dates are quite short. We don't get to know the characters too well. And again, because we can't really explore that nuance, it's difficult to really go anywhere with a lot of these plot lines. They have to wrap up in a short amount of time. So it's hard to really dig deep into what's going on there. I think the main 3 that the development of the game seems to really focus on, I'm assuming these are the characters who were devised first, just because this is an indie project developed from a Kickstarter. So I'm assuming the development took a really long time because they really started with a couple characters at first, fleshing out those stories, and then they added a couple more characters, fleshing that out and matching with the pacing of the game and building the narrative. It seems like you can sort of follow the steps that they would have taken to build this. felt really good. Sorry, brief tangent. We're just going to talk about the Kickstarter because this game made a lot of money from like supporters on Kickstarter. They made almost $300,000 and the tiers were nuts. You could pay $3,000 basically to have like a writing credit and to be a writing consultant on this game. And 2 people did that. Had I been around at the time and had I had the money, I probably would have paid the $3,000 too because I have notes. There's some changes I would make. And we'll get into that. But the Kickstarter was crazy. They made so much money. But because they made so much money, one, the people who are making this game can eat and I assume get a livable wage and make their games at a pace that is normal and fair based on the compensation and based on the workload, which is really good because not all developers do that. If you're not really familiar with how game development happens, again, Waypoint, the Vice podcast, they talk about it at length often, what goes into making games, and there's a lot of reporting that happens on it if you're not really following games media like that. It's really interesting. It is exploitative and quite bad. But yeah, I don't know, if you're interested in knowing how games are made and what happens and what companies do to make them happen, they're interesting listens, and that's an interesting piece of research that you can do. Anywho, back to the gays. Just like based on the promotional material of this game, it looks like they developed 3 characters first, and they're the 3 characters who are on like the key art of the game. And then if you check out the Kickstarter, they're adding more characters later. Like Pocket, I didn't realize was not in the game the whole time, and that was like a Kickstarter incentive, was to add this cat to the game, and that's why that storyline isn't really like real, if that makes sense. I don't know. Pocket was like my least favorite part because I just think it's kind of weird, but I guess it's like a meme. It's a joke, I'm assuming. My favorite part of the Kickstarter page is this line at the end, right before like one of the trailer gifs that says, "The couple that slays together stays together." And that's how you know it's queer representation, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between and outside, is that they use the word slay, the S word. So we go on these slay dates with all of these slay boyfriends. Honestly, we slay at the restaurant, slay in the bedroom, slay in the dungeons, because we're slaying the monsters. Slay, wig, work, hunty. Don't forget to like and slay scribe. Anywho, our main 3 slays who are on all the cover art, they, I think, benefit a lot because I'm assuming that they were the characters who were written first. And because they were written first, they can be baked into the main narrative a little bit more often than the other 3. Like Jesse, who's the only like non-controllable character because you don't date him. Jesse's the cousin. I don't think I said his name when I talked about him initially. He'll ask like how they're doing. He'll be like, "Hey, I heard you're getting like involved with this person. He's really nice." Or like, "I've heard like kind of bad things. Like maybe, you know, be careful. Be careful of protecting yourself." So it's interesting that he has like thoughts and feelings about these 3 people. But then any other romance option, they don't really come into play when it comes to the main story. Like there are no narrative beats where you can invite anybody except for the final boss, because obviously you can invite anyone. Oh my gosh. Duh, hello. The other main thing about Boyfriend Dungeon is in this world, there are people who can turn into weapons, and they don't really expand on that. They don't explain the rules of the world. It's kind of like Soul Eater, if you're familiar with that anime, in the sense that there's weapons and the people who wield them. And weapons are just like people. Like they just are, but they just have this like extra supernatural ability. There's not an explanation. There's not a reason. And we're not in like a high fantasy setting either. So it feels kind of odd because you're just like, wow, she's just like a normal girl and she can become a dagger. Or it's just like, you know what? They're a university student and they can transform into a glaive. He's a K-pop idol and he can become a laser sword. Slazer sword. There are certain story beats as a part of the main narrative where you can invite the big 3 to come with you, like I think mostly of like the July 4th barbecue that happens. So they're just acknowledged by the narrative a little bit more. Isaac, Sunder, and Valyria, and then any other character is kind of pushed to the wayside, and they feel mostly optional because there's not really a scripted beat to make sure that you talk to them. As far as I know, if you don't pick up the weapon, I'm assuming you can probably just like skip them, like not meet them, not speak to them, like totally just play around them, and then only date the people that you have to date. And I don't think you have to max out anybody's romances either in order to beat the game. And that's probably why some people beat this game in 2 hours and then gave it a 1 out of 10 on Metacritic. Who's to say? Because this game is kind of easy, it's an easy slay. The pacing feels kind of odd. I really like Hades. It was one of my favorite games of 2020. And I happen to be surprisingly good at it, considering the general consensus seems to be that the game was quite difficult. I don't know if that game just tickles a specific itch in my brain. Slay! I don't know if it slays a slay in my brain, but it slays. I love Sladies. The hits keep coming. Anyways, Boyfriend Dunge is not as hard as Hades, so I found that this game is pretty easy. Also, like the hit stun is pretty broken because all of your enemies that you are just like hitting, like you can kind of just like do chip damage until they're dead. They're none of them are immune, so they just can't hit you right back because you can just keep whacking them until they're done. The only challenges that I really noted were when a room was like full of enemies. Sometimes that was overwhelming because I didn't really have to dodge that much because you don't have to like practice and be good at this game because it's easy enough in other regards. And if your health is like low, because there is a leveling system to this game. So if your health is low because you're low level and you're in a area with higher level enemies that you're supposed to be in, it can be kind of hard because if you do get hit from making mistakes, they can do a lot of damage to you. That was the only challenge I found in the dungeons themselves. But because of the rate at which I was progressing, I think I was beating the dungeons a lot faster than the narrative was ready to accommodate for. I think they anticipated that people would like have a harder time. Granted, the game is short, so it's not designed to necessarily be a slog. But I think they could have benefited from like scripted losses to keep the pacing a little bit more locked and to not feel weird. Because I was really taken aback when I was at the end of the second dungeon. There's only 2 dungeons in this game, which it should just have more. It just should have more. I hope they bring more in DLC. But I was like partway through the second dungeon, and then it's like you get a text from your cousin being like, I can't believe the summer's almost over and you're going to be gone in like no time. Because I was like, what? Wait, whoa, what? Huh? I didn't know that there was only 2 dungeons walking into this game because I didn't remember that from my podcast listening and any of my prior research. So I was just like shocked because I wasn't prepared to be almost at the end of this game. It felt like I had only gone like halfway through most of the characters' romance plot lines. So I was like, wait, I'm almost done, but I'm like not even close to being finished this element of the game. I haven't even met one of the characters. I missed Rowan because I didn't know that you had to go find them in the woods. I thought they would be in the dungeon like everybody else. So I completely missed Rowan. I have nothing to say about that character. I don't know them. If I saw them walking in the street, I wouldn't know a thing. Sorry to that NB. Yeah, it just feels the pacing of this game is a little bit odd. It's just hard to know where you're at. There's not like a day or a calendar system like there is in Persona to know how close you are from time sensitive events because that's not really the point of this game. It's not about time management. It just felt odd that there was no anchor, especially because part of the stakes of the narrative is that there is a time limit and you're leaving at the end of the summer. So you're cultivating these relationships knowing that you're going to walk away from them, which doesn't make sense. You should just stay in Verona Beach. I progressed through the dungeons very quickly. You level up a lot if you're good at this game. And I felt like I was trying to pace myself too, because I make it to like the 7th or 9th level, which each of those floors in the dungeon have like a checkpoint. So I'd make it there, but then I'd start from like floor 3 or 4, 5 so that I would be able to build my romance ranks with each of the weapons because I wanted to see how all of those stories played out. So I was playing at a pretty, like, probably slow pace. I know, like, a lot of dating sims, you tend to pick one character and you stick with them throughout the whole playthrough. But for this game, because you can date everyone without consequence, because there's no jealousy factors, there's no awareness even that you're dating other people. You're player sexual. You're dating without nuance, and you can date everyone. And there's not a consequence for dating multiple people because the objective of the game is to be like comfort food, and you're making friends or having relationships, but you're experiencing them all, and you get to live the positive elements of that fantasy. Is that you get to deal with the soft elements of like real world problems, and you can just date these people. You know what I mean? I was really putting in a lot of effort to max out these storylines because I wanted to know how each of them ended and how they concluded. So I was really playing at a reasonable pace. So it just felt odd. The game feels like it has a lot more to give, and then it feels like 60% of the way through they're like, baby, it's done. Baby, it's over. You slayed. You slayed so hard that the game is now done. And there's nothing more to do. There are no monsters to slay. You've sled what you want to sled. I'm so sorry. I will stop saying I can't make that promise, actually. Nope. No. Ignore me. So that's really all I have to say about like the main narrative and the mechanics themselves of BF Dunge. Now I would like to talk about the meat of this game, pun intended. The boyfriends. I will be ranking the characters in order from least best to best. Least slay to wig slay, if you will. So my least favorite partner in the game was Sawyer. I think this largely has to do with age, because of the first three characters that we meet being Isaac, Sunder, and Valeria, who are all like 28 and over, let's say, between 28 and like 35. They're all in that age range of like being real adults. The game gives the impression that you're going to be dating mostly people in that age range, especially if you're like me and you don't know too much about it. I was like, okay, these three people are like established adults. So I was kind of taken aback that the last character that I met that I cared about, because I don't care about Pocket and I didn't meet Rowan, was someone who really reads as a child. Sawyer wears a school uniform blazer that looks akin to a blazer one of the other characters wears. So it makes it look like they're wearing school uniforms and not just like stylish blazers that happen to look like each other. So it makes them read like they're high school students or younger and not like college age folks. The narrative addresses this by making it clear, like a little too late, that Sawyer is an adult, but they read as a teenager, and I think that's the idea, especially for a game where you are the player insert character. You perceive it from your viewpoint, right? So if I'm assuming if you're a 14-year-old and you're playing this game, you might really like Sawyer. I'm assuming if you're an old creep who's playing this game, you might also really like Sawyer. Because Sawyer's storyline is that they're like a struggling, I don't know if they specify what year, but they give first year university energy. They don't understand responsibility. They're really bad at school. They're struggling with the change in workload. And like the other facet of their storyline is that they can't cook. This list is obviously personal preference, but Sawyer was just like my least favorite. Because why would I want to sit there and have this person be like, whoa, I can't make a hard-boiled egg. The water's too dangerous. I'm gonna manage to make the egg explode like it's a bomb. I can't make the grilled cheese. I burned down my whole dorm. There's nothing appealing to me about the Sawyer storyline. It is what it is. I like that they're non-binary, and I think that's where it starts and where it ends for me. My next least slay is Sunder. Listen. I know that this game toys around with like a soft magic system, but the fact that Sunder is a vampire and that just like unapologetically happened, I honestly, that was camp. Like, I guess I appreciate that the Sunder relationship explored sexuality in a way that some of the other relationships don't explore, because Sunder's more intimate with you and you have to grapple with the notion of like being in an open relationship maybe, or being with someone who doesn't want to fully commit to you because they want to sleep around. So it introduces these notes, these accents of like a cheating storyline, but it doesn't really manifest because that's not what this game is about. It's not about like the drama. It is just about having sex with a sexy vampire a couple times, and then you have to just like be okay with the fact that he's not that into you. But also, hear me out. You're a vampire. You're super, super old. I feel like the issues that you would be facing when it comes to dating wouldn't necessarily be commitment. Like, it could be in the sense that like you're always going to outlive your partner, and unless you're turning your partner into a vampire, there's just like no way that you're going to be able to like be with them forever. But also, if you're super, super old, I imagine the world to a degree is your sandbox, because you can just do whatever you want and the consequences are virtually nothing. You can play God. Like, Sunder could have just killed us at any point. But also, they can just like have sex with whoever they want. They're gonna live forever. Why not? I'm assuming at that age, though, you would have better communication skills and a better understanding of what you want out of not life. It just felt like they were like, he's a sexy playboy and he's like kind of bad and he doesn't want to be with you and he just like doesn't know what he wants and he's like he's a fuckboy and he like sleeps around and he's also like so horny, but also like kind of a romantic, but we're gonna one up it just a little bit more and he's a fucking vampire. It was camp. It was camp. And I have to respect it. I have, you know what? I prefer Above and Beyond as opposed to yes, queen, give us nothing. My next, middle slay, average slay. She is the average on the slay curve. Valeria. Again, I think it's just mostly because of my position as a queer person and being interested in folks who are masculine. She's really nice though. She'd be a great friend because she's like the coolest character. She has a hobby that she's really committed to. She's interesting, she's spontaneous, and also plus points more than I think anybody else. She really just like unapologetically and enthusiastically wants to be with you. And in a way that is very healthy and non-toxic and in pursuit of her own happiness. I don't have a lot of critique. I just found her like she just like wasn't my cup of tea. But I think there's nothing wrong inherently with the writing of the storyline. She's just not my favorite because she's a girl. Because she's a girlfriend and this is boyfriend. There are people who would say that and like mean it, which is very unfortunate. We're now moving on to second slay, silver slay, slaver, if you will, Isaac. Here's the thing. Isaac has it all. He's rich. He's largely well adjusted. He's a good communicator. He establishes boundaries. He's fucking hot. He has it all. I was so enamored with Isaac the whole playthrough. He's probably like the best option, the most rational option. He's the option that makes sense. You know what I mean? And if this game played with love triangles, Isaac would definitely fit very well into one of those categories, into one of those prongs of being like, he's the choice you should make. And then like this other person is like the choice you shouldn't. I love Isaac. Isaac is everything I want in a partner. So you might be thinking, if I have all of these good things to say, why isn't he my number one? The thing about Isaac's story is that I think it's like bigger than what this game can hold. His story is about intergenerational wealth, having a huge issue with his father, not being able to live up to expectations. Like he has a much more specific conflict than any other character faces in this game outside of the player. And it's the one that I think, given more time, could use a more nuanced explanation. And again, I've said it multiple times, this game is not going for that hard-hitting, like sad story. It's okay with brushing with it. It's okay with like dancing with it for a little bit. But at a certain point, it walks away from it to focus on something that is just a little bit more positive. Isaac is like the only character who I think could have like a standalone game. I could very easily see his storyline translating into something that takes a lot more time to flesh out and explore. Whereas I think like almost every other storyline is wrapped up in an appropriate amount of time and is suited to the pacing and the storytelling format of BF Dunge. We've now reached maximum slayage in the form of a light slaver. Seven is my favorite character in the game. And again, I think it just has to do with like personal preference and age range because Seven is the only character who reads to be in his 20s. So that's something I would gravitate towards. However, Seven is also the character that I have the biggest problem with. And it's because Seven is a K-pop idol and I'm obsessed with K-pop. So I'm like, this would never happen. I am more happy to believe that I could date a vampire more realistically than I could date an idol, especially in the circumstances of this game. There are just some things that don't make sense that I for some reason, I can't let go of. I have so many questions. Why is he in America for so long? Why is he never practicing? Like he's never like, sorry, I can't hang out. I have to go learn a new dance. I'm rehearsing. We're getting ready for our comeback. It's coming up really soon. Like none of that is present there. So I'm just like, if we wanted to explore idols, we could very easily explore idols in a way that's like more realistic and really like baked into the text. It feels like Seven should have a song. There's a lot of original music and songs that were written specifically for this game. Like Seven should just have a song, right? Because he's a singer. He expresses that he's more of a dancer. He's more of a dancer type. He's like in the performance unit of the group. And we don't see anything about his group. We only know one other member. And the main plot line is he has issues with his management because they don't really do a good job of taking care of him. and he has issues with his career and where he wants to go and what his trajectory will look like. And right now they're trying to push a duo unit with Seven and another member, Sungwoo. One of the factors that upsets Seven is that they want to change Sungwoo's name to Lucky so that they can be the duo Lucky Seven. And he's like, no, like Sungwoo's trying to like copy my brand. He's trying to take away the only thing that's unique about me. I just think it would have made more sense if they were like, this character is a TikTok star. They're a social media influencer. They got big by doing covers on the internet, like we've seen a lot. Like it just would have made more sense if Seven was like a Shawn Mendes type or something like that, where it's just like really like small beginnings, obviously talented, but maybe he has like a really shitty contract with his agency. He was signed when he was young, so he didn't know what the contract meant. Things like that, I think, would have made for a tighter story that made more sense, that didn't just have K-pop idol attached to it. It just felt weird. Like it just took me out of it in a way that, like, for example, like vampirism didn't. Because I was like, why is he here? That's not his job. Also, he has like a lot of free time. No one's watching him. K-pop idols are barely allowed to breathe, let alone date in the public eye. And that's what Seven is doing. They kind of touch on that with a fan approaching him in public and getting like upset that he's dating someone. It's unreasonable that he would have enough time to date you. He like reasonably shouldn't have enough of a private life to be able to get away from his work, to be able to spend time with you. It's a really bad look and like largely unacceptable for idols to date people in most instances. So he's jeopardizing his career by being with you, and that's a context that's ignored in the game, which is a reality that idols face. Again, I know I said this game isn't necessarily interested in grappling with the truth of what it wants to explore. He brings up that he doesn't like his management. He brings up that he doesn't feel valued. He has clinical depression. That's not a problem at all. Actually, I think his clinical depression storyline is handled quite well because he just is able to live in the world and is able to function, and his storyline isn't specifically that he's inhibited by his depression. He's like, no, I have habits and I'm able to cope, and I'm in therapy and I'm taking steps to be functional. That's the biggest thing that I think I appreciated about the Seven storyline. And the dates are cute. I think the romance is exciting because he also more enthusiastically wants to be with you, more than Isaac. Isaac is kind of like, yeah, maybe we'll be like a real something someday. But Seven like wants to be with you and it is transparent that he really likes you. So the writing is really tight in the relationship aspect. I think if they just adjusted his career and his like personal struggle, I just would have bought it a lot more if he was like an industry plant or like, again, came up through social media and got a following. And so they're trying to capitalize on him because he has an image and because he built like a public brand. Like he can still have an issue with his management company. He can still have an issue with the type of music he wants to make and where his career is going. But just like the K-pop of it all, I feel like doesn't impact the character enough. Again, Seven is my favorite character. And I feel like it's very characteristic of me to be like, this is my favorite thing about it. This is everything I don't like. And have a lot of like nuanced things to say because it's the thing I care about the most. I think that concludes everything I wanted to say about Boyfriend Dungeon. I think this game just would have benefited from more time. I think it just needed to be longer. And it will be because they hit their Kickstarter goals and there's more stuff on the way. So that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to playing it. Even if they come out with like a Boyfriend Dungeon 2 a couple years down the line, I'd gladly play it. I think this series really deserves its flowers. It deserves a lot of love. If you're interested in it, you should go play it if you haven't already. I can't recommend it enough. I think it's really good. Again, play with caution if stalking stories bother you and unwanted advances bother you, because there's no way around it in the story. I think it's handled very carefully and quite intelligently. And again, this game isn't interested in hitting you with gut punches really, really hard. But the storyline is admittedly uncomfortable. So I can understand if you are someone who has had personal brushes with that in your real life, that you wouldn't want to engage with it. That totally makes sense. And maybe don't play it. I'm looking forward to when the DLC eventually comes out. Right now, I don't think there's a timeline. And if the developers can work at a pace that's reasonable, I don't care how long it takes, really, as long as it's not like Hive Swap and well, if you know, you know. Let me know if you enjoy this format of video that's more candid and not necessarily researched. This was fun for me. It's a lot easier for me to make this style of video because I can kind of just share my opinions without necessarily having to have a holistic take. If you like this video, be sure to slay. Bye!